The storm had been tapping against the glass all evening, a restless rhythm against the 41st floor windows as Lila Hartman pushed away from her glowing monitor. Midnight had a way of making the office feel like a confession booth, quiet, emptied of ambition, softened enough for truths to slip out. And tonight, she wasn't alone. She heard the soft roll of a cart before she saw him. Adrian Cole, always arriving like a steady note in a chaotic score. She wasn't sure why she looked up this time instead of pretending to be busy, but when his eyes met hers, he paused. Not shocked, not intrusive, just aware. "You don't have to hide your tired eyes from me," he said. A simple sentence, but it cracked something open inside her chest. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here." Now, back to Lila. She blinked, unsettled by how gently Adrian had said it, as if he could see the exhaustion she'd spent years camouflaging behind polish and precision. She straightened in her chair, forcing a breath to steady her voice. "Long day," she said lightly. "Or long decade." A faint smile curved at the corner of his mouth, the kind that didn't ask for attention. He stepped inside her office to empty the wastebasket, but tonight he moved slower, as if reading the air between them. Shadows from the city lights traced soft lines across his face, and for the first time, she noticed how he carried himself. Quiet, grounded, aware of every detail without calling attention to it. Most people in this building moved like they were proving something. Adrian moved like someone who already knew who he was. She wasn't sure why that unnerved her. "You're always here later than everyone else," he said, not as judgment, but observation. "Comes with the job. Or the expectations." She didn't respond, but her silence was an answer. Adrian emptied the bin, adjusted the chair she'd pushed aside, and straightened a stack of case files. That tiny gesture, precise and respectful, felt more intimate than the men in her world who tried impressing her with expensive dinners. This was different. Unassuming. Steady. Dangerous in a way she couldn't name. "You work nights by choice?" she asked. He shrugged. "Sometimes life chooses for you." There was no self-pity in his tone, just truth, and something about that truth lodged itself beneath her ribs. For a moment, she didn't feel like Lila Hartman, the associate groomed for partnership, the daughter of a woman who curated her life like a brand. She felt like a person a man was actually looking at, not assessing. He finished wiping her desk, but he didn't leave. He lingered, hand resting lightly on the doorframe. "You should go home," he said softly, almost as if it mattered to him. "Rest." She opened her mouth to dismiss it, to fall back into her armor, but something stopped her. Instead she asked, "And you?" "I've got a few more floors. But I'm good." She studied him, the calm in his voice, the stillness in his posture. People in her world never sounded calm. They sounded caffeinated, competitive, exhausted. Adrian was none of those things. He nodded once, a small goodbye, and stepped into the hall. But she found herself calling after him. "Hey, Adrian." He turned, eyebrows raised just slightly. "Do people ever really see you?" She didn't know why she asked it. She regretted at the moment the words left her tongue. It was too intimate, too intrusive, too revealing of her own loneliness. For a heartbeat, he didn't answer. Then, only when they're paying attention. The sentence hit her like a soft, deliberate knock on a locked door inside her. He walked away, his cart rolling down the corridor toward the elevators. And she sat there, pulse unsteady, knowing with frightening clarity that something had just shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like the city lights flickering on one by one at dusk. A beginning she hadn't meant to invite. When she finally closed her laptop and stepped into the empty hallway, she caught herself glancing toward the path he'd taken minutes earlier, as if the echo of his presence still hung there. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about her caseload, or her mother's expectations, or tomorrow's meeting with senior partners. She was thinking about a man who moved through the world without demanding space, but somehow took up residence in hers. And as the elevator doors slid shut, she whispered something she couldn't quite explain, not even to herself. Why did that feel like the start of something? The next night arrived faster than Lila expected, though the clock insisted it moved at its usual pace. She told herself she wouldn't wait for him, that she wouldn't check the time every 10 minutes, wouldn't listen for the quiet hum of rolling wheels across marble. But at 9:11 p.m., when she heard the familiar sound slipping down the hallway like a secret meant only for her, something in her chest tightened. Not fear, not excitement. Something between the two, sharp enough to feel real. Adrian appeared at her doorway with the same steady presence. But this time, his eyes paused on her with a flicker of recognition, as if he, too, had replayed their last conversation in his mind. "Evening," he said. A simple word, but charged in a way it hadn't been before. "Hi," she answered, softer than she meant to. He moved inside, setting his supplies down with quiet precision. Tonight felt different. The space between them, yesterday just a room, now felt like a line neither one was fully stepping over, but both were aware of. "You're back late again," he noted, wiping down the conference table. "Guess I like working when everything's quiet, or when no one can watch you fall apart," he said gently, without looking up. She exhaled through her nose, half a startled laugh, half a wounded confession. "You always talk like that." "Like what?" "Like you're reading past the surface of things." "I don't read people," he said. "I just notice what they try to hide." Her heartbeat stumbled. He didn't say it as flirtation. He said it like truth. And truth was far more dangerous. She turned in her chair, really looking at him. He wore the same navy work jacket, the same dark jeans, the same pair of gloves tucked into his back pocket. Nothing about him announced authority or importance. Yet he carried a presence that made her straighten without realizing she had. "So what am I hiding?" she asked. "You really want the answer?" She nodded before she could stop herself. He leaned on the mop handle, head slightly tilted as he studied her, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that made her feel seen, like he was looking at the shape of her feelings rather than her face. "You're exhausted," he said, "but not from work. From pretending work is the only thing that matters." She swallowed. "Hard. And you?" she whispered. "What are you pretending?" Adrian didn't answer right away. He returned to wiping the glass wall behind her, his reflection floating beside hers. "That I'm fine being invisible," he said at last. It was such a quiet confession, she almost missed it under the low hum of the AC. Invisible. The word stung more than she expected. Lila had been stared at her whole life. By her mother, by colleagues, by men who measured her like an investment. Being seen had always felt like a duty. She'd never wondered what it felt like to want visibility. "Adrian," she said softly, "you're not invisible." He didn't turn, but his hands paused for a fraction of a second on the glass. The smallest hesitation. The kind that meant the sentence had landed somewhere it wasn't supposed to. Then he kept working, as if giving weight to her words would make them dangerous. "People see what they expect to see," he said. "In offices like this, a man with a cart is just the cart." "Not to me," she said. He stopped again. Not dramatically, just for a breath. "I know," he said quietly, and that quiet almost knocked the air out of her. Silence thickened between them, but not an empty silence. A charged one, the kind that fills a space before something important happens. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Go ahead. Do you ever feel like you live in a world that wasn't built for you?" Adrian finally turned, leaning back against the glass wall, crossing his arms. "Every day," he answered. "But I learned something a long time ago. You don't need a world to be built for you to find a place in it." He looked at her. Not lightly, not shyly, directly. "What about you?" he asked. "Do you live in a world built for you?" She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I live in a world built for someone I'm supposed to be," she said. "Not someone I actually am." That earned the first real smile of the night from him. Not the polite one, not the careful one. A real one that softened his features and made her pulse skip. "Then maybe," he said quietly, "you're more invisible than me." The words stunned her. Not because they were cruel, but because they felt true. Uncomfortably, undeniably true. He finished cleaning, gathering his supplies, but didn't leave. Instead, he lingered in the doorway, hand on the frame. "Good night, Lila." "Good night, Adrian." But he didn't step into the hall. Not yet. He looked back at her, voice low. "And thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me. Even if it was just for a moment." He left before she could respond, his footsteps fading into the corridor. But she didn't move. Not for a long time. Because the truth was simple and terrifying. She hadn't just seen him. She'd felt seen by him. And she didn't know which part scared her more. By the third night, Lila stopped pretending. She didn't wait for the sound of wheels gliding down the hallway. She tried burying herself in spreadsheets, in case law, in the illusion of productivity, but every few minutes, her attention drifted to the glass wall of her office, to the quiet corridor beyond it. When the sound finally came, soft but unmistakable, she felt something traitorous shift inside her chest. Adrian entered, his card in front of him, posture relaxed but eyes hyper-aware, as if he could feel the tension in the air even before stepping through her doorway. "Evening," he murmured. His voice carried that same steady warmth, but tonight there was something else beneath it, something like hesitation or maybe anticipation. "Hi," she said, clearing her throat. "Rough day?" he asked, glancing at her desk cluttered with notes, highlighted briefs, and a half-finished cup of coffee. "More like a rough year," she said before she could filter it. He huffed a quiet breath that bordered on a laugh. "That honest, huh?" Apparently. Adrian walked around her office with practiced familiarity, but tonight he wasn't rushing through motions. He wiped her table slowly, straightening a toppled pen, adjusting a misaligned file, all tiny gestures that felt more like attention than obligation. "You ever think about doing something else?" he asked without looking up. She blinked. "What do you mean?" "Law's demanding. This place." He gestured to the floor-to-ceiling windows, the endless nighttime city beyond. "Feels like it takes more than it gives." She didn't answer, not because she disagreed, but because she had never said that truth aloud. "I used to want something different," she admitted. "But people don't expect me to change direction. Not after everything invested into this." "Expectations," he repeated softly. The words sounded heavier in his voice. "Do you always follow them?" "Do you?" she countered. He paused mid-motion, looking at her with an unreadable expression. "I follow what keeps my family stable," he said. "And sometimes that's not the same as what I want." Something pressed inside her ribs, an ache she didn't have a name for. "And what do you want?" He shook his head lightly. "That's the kind of question that changes things." "Maybe some things need changing," she whispered. He went still. Not dramatically, just a breath stopping in his chest before he kept wiping the table. "Lila," he said quietly. "We shouldn't talk," she finished. "Like this," he clarified. "Why?" Another pause. Then he sighed. "Because some lines aren't supposed to blur. Your world and mine. They're not designed to overlap." "Worlds don't overlap on their own," she said. "People choose to cross." The sentence surprised even her. He lowered the cloth, leaning against the edge of her desk. "And you're choosing to cross?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I know I don't want to go back to pretending nothing's happening here." Adrian looked at her for a long, unreadable moment. He wasn't a man who filled silence with noise. He let the quiet speak. And tonight, that quiet felt like a confession neither knew how to make. Finally, he exhaled. "I don't want to pretend either," he said softly. The admission hovered between them, raw, real, irreversible. Lila's heartbeat quickened. "Then what do we do?" "We don't rush," he said. "We stay honest. We don't lose ourselves in something we can't manage." "But we don't ignore it," she insisted. "No," he murmured. "We don't ignore it." Their eyes held, charged and unsteady, a fragile pull stretching between them like a thread that had been waiting for acknowledgement. "Tell me something real," she said. "Something you don't say to anyone." He wet his lips, thinking. "When I clean these floors," he began, voice low, "I think about building something of my own one day. A small business, consulting work, helping people like my mom, my neighbors. Folks who don't get the chances others do." Lila leaned forward. "That's not small." "Feels small from down here," he said. "Feels unreachable." "Not to me," she whispered. "It sounds like purpose." Adrian's gaze softened. "Your turn," he said. "Tell me something real." She hesitated. Then, "I'm scared that without my job, without the expectations, I don't know who I am." He stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that she felt the warmth of him. "Maybe that's where you start," he murmured. Her breath trembled. "You make it sound easy." "Nothing about this is easy," he said. His voice was calm but charged, like a held breath. "But it feels true." A long silence followed, steady, electric, alive. "Good night, Lila," he said finally. "Good night, Adrian." He took one step toward the door, then looked back. "And be careful," he added softly. "Because once you see someone clearly, it's hard to unsee them." Then he disappeared down the hall, leaving her staring at the empty space he'd left behind, knowing she was already too deep to pretend she hadn't heard everything he wasn't saying. The shift happened quietly, So quietly Lila couldn't pinpoint the exact moment it changed. But by the end of the week, their conversations weren't accidents anymore. They were patterns. Intentional. Dangerous. And she felt herself walking toward that danger with steady, unflinching steps. Tonight, Adrian arrived later than usual. She felt the delay like a tug inside her chest she didn't want to analyze. When he finally stepped into her doorway, the relief that washed over her was embarrassingly visible. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Long night? He asked gently. Long without knowing if you were coming. She almost said, but swallowed the truth. Just long, she answered instead. Adrian nodded, rolling his card inside. But something in his expression was heavier than usual. He moved quietly through her office, less precise, less present. You okay? She asked. He didn't answer right away. He wiped down her desk slowly, as if his thoughts weighed down every motion. I had a meeting with building management earlier, he said finally. Lila tensed. About what? About lingering. Her heart dropped. Because of me, she whispered. Adrian didn't deny it. Someone noticed I spend too much time on this floor. In one office. He looked at her then. Really looked. And there was no frustration in his eyes, only concern. You don't need trouble because of me. I don't care what they think, she said too quickly, too fiercely. You should, he countered quietly. In your world, perceptions matter. They build careers. Or destroy them. Her chest tightened. Why does everyone keep telling me what my world wants? Like I don't get a say? Adrian set down the cloth and leaned against the edge of her desk. Because I've seen people punished. For less than this. Because I know how quickly someone in your position can be questioned. And because I don't want to be the reason you lose anything. She stood. What if I'm losing myself by doing what everyone expects? He held her gaze. Then that's something you have to reckon with. Reckon with. The phrase hit her harder than she expected. Adrian, she said softly, I don't want distance. He exhaled, a slow, conflicted sound, before walking to the glass wall, staring at the city lights below like they held the answers. You're not supposed to talk to me like this, he said. I know, she whispered. I'm not supposed to respond like this, he added. I know, she said again. A quiet tension built between them. Thick, undeniable. The kind that makes the air feel charged, like something is about to tip. He turned back toward her. Do you even realize what you're doing, Lila? Yes, she said. A lie. No, he replied, reading her too easily. You're stepping into something that can't stay hidden. People will talk. Your colleagues. Your family. They'll question what you're doing with someone like me. Someone like you, she repeated sharply. A man with a mop, he said simply. She flinched as if struck. Not because he was wrong, but because she hated the way the world labeled him. Is that how you see yourself? She asked. No, he said. But it's how they'll see me. And you'll feel that weight, even if you pretend you won't. I'm not pretending. Not yet. The honesty cut deep. Adrian, what are you afraid of? Hurting you, he said. And getting hurt for wanting something I shouldn't. Her breath caught. Wanting. The word echoed through her chest. Tell me, she whispered. Tell you what? What you want. A long silence stretched. Too long. Then, quietly. I want something I don't have the right to want. He stepped closer. She didn't move. He inhaled as if steadying himself. And you? He asked. What do you want, Lila? Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from truth. I want to stop pretending I don't think about you when you're not here. His jaw tightened. His eyes softened. And his composure cracked. Just slightly. Just enough to reveal the war he'd been fighting behind it. Lila, it wasn't a warning. It was surrender. She took a single step toward him, the smallest movement. But it shifted the entire room. The city noise fell away. The office lights dimmed into irrelevance. Only the space between them mattered. Adrian, she said gently, we're already crossing the line. We're just too afraid to admit it. His breath hitched. And if crossing it breaks things? Then we deal with the pieces together. Another silence, heavy loaded. A silence that felt like standing on the edge of something vast. He closed his eyes, wrestling with himself. When he opened them again, the fight was still there, but so was something else. Something unguarded. This isn't simple, he said. I don't want simple, she replied. I want real. It was the last sentence before the world shifted again. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just a quiet acknowledgement between two people who could no longer pretend they weren't choosing each other, despite everything. And when Adrian finally whispered, "Good night, Lila," she heard everything he wasn't ready to say. Everything she was ready to feel. The fallout didn't come in an explosion. It arrived in whispers, quiet, sharp, slicing through the office like paper cuts you don't feel until they bleed. By Monday morning, Lila sensed it the moment she stepped off the elevator. The glances, the abrupt silences, the way two junior associates straightened when she walked past, eyes flicking toward each other with a meaning that tightened her stomach. Someone had seen her and Adrian talking, longer than colleagues should, closer than strangers were allowed to be. She tried to shake it off, bury herself in work, but tension stalked her through every hallway. It followed her into Charles Redmond's office when he said, "Close the door," in a tone that meant nothing good. He didn't look angry. Anger would have been easier. He looked disappointed, which was infinitely worse. "You've been staying late," he said, flipping through her billing sheets. "Consistently." "That's not unusual," she replied, steadying her voice. "Not for you." "But," he tapped his pen twice, "people have mentioned company." Her blood ran cold. "Company?" "A custodian," he said plainly. "Tall, early 30s. Dark jacket. Talks with you at length." The professional neutrality in his voice made her want to sink into the floor. "Lila," he continued, "this firm values professionalism. Optics matter. You're on track for partner. I don't want to see you jeopardize that." Jeopardize? Because she talked to someone they believed beneath her. She left his office feeling constricted, as if the walls had narrowed around her ribs. She didn't see Adrian that night, because she went home early for the first time in weeks. She told herself she was giving him space. But the truth was simpler, uglier. She was scared. Not of him. Of what everyone else thought. The next night, she went back to her normal schedule, but Adrian didn't appear. The absence felt louder than footsteps. Louder than conversation. Louder than the storm outside hammering against the windows. She waited. 10 minutes. 20. An hour. Nothing. Something was wrong. The thought thudded in her chest with rising panic. At 12:47 a.m., she grabbed her coat and rushed down to the lobby. The night guard recognized her and nodded politely. "You looking for Adrian?" Her breath caught. "He's not here. Called out tonight," the guard said. "Family situation, I think." Family. The word made her pulse spike. She stepped outside into the cold night and did something reckless, something she couldn't explain even to herself. She got in her car and drove. She didn't know his exact address, but she remembered a detail he'd mentioned offhand once. "I live off Briarwood." It was a start. She drove through winding streets, headlights carving narrow paths through the dark. When she finally found the building, a modest brick apartment complex with flickering stairwell lights, she hesitated, gripping the steering wheel. She had no right to be here. She had every reason to turn back. But something in her chest refused to let her leave. She climbed the stairs to the second floor, heart pounding. She didn't know which door was his, until one opened before she could knock. Maya Cole stepped out, her expression instantly sharpening. "You're her," Maya said flatly. Not a question. A verdict. Lila swallowed. "Is Adrian busy?" Maya cut in. "And you shouldn't be here." She tried to stand tall, but grief shadowed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her shoulders. "Please," Lila said softly. I wanted to make sure he was okay." "Why?" Maya snapped. Curiosity? Pity? Or because real life finally slapped you in the face and you came to see the mess behind the man? The words hit hard, but not because they were wrong. Lila steadied herself. "Because I care," she whispered. The hallway fell still. Maya's expression cracked for a heartbeat, something like disbelief flickering through it. Then a weak voice called from inside the apartment. "Maya, who's at the door?" The sound sliced through Lila. She didn't need to be told. It was his mother, Denise. Sick. Maya stepped aside reluctantly, letting Lila see inside. Just barely. A dim living room. Medical bills on the table. A blanket draped over the arm of the couch. A quiet, heavy struggle woven into every corner. Lila's chest tightened painfully. This wasn't a world built for comfort. But it was real. Honest. Human. "Maya," Adrian's voice called faintly from deeper in the apartment. "I'm coming." He appeared a moment later, weariness etched across his face. But when he saw Lila, standing in his hallway at nearly 1 a.m., the exhaustion fell away, replaced by shock. "Lila, what are you doing here?" She reached for words, but none felt big enough, true enough. So she said the simplest one. "You didn't show." His eyes softened. The hallway, the cold, the fear, the distance, they all collapsed into the space between them. "You came anyway," he whispered. She nodded, and everything unspoken between them grew impossibly louder. Maya watched from the side, arms crossed, but her stare wasn't hostile anymore. It was wary, testing, as if she was waiting to see whether Lila would flinch. Lila didn't flinch. "Adrian," she said, voice trembling but certain, "let me be here. Wherever here is for you right now." He exhaled slowly, and in that moment, tired, pulled apart by responsibility, standing in a dim hallway at midnight, he finally let her see the truth he'd been carrying for years. And he didn't turn her away. Hospitals always smelled like cold air and old fear, like places where time slowed down just enough for worry to bloom unchecked. Lila followed Adrian through the automatic doors, her heartbeat tripping over itself as the night swallowed them into bright fluorescent halls. Denise Cole lay in a narrow bed, tubes gently tracking her breaths, monitors humming in quiet rhythm. The sight softened Lila instantly, not with pity, but with reverence. This was the woman who raised him. This was the center of his world. Adrian moved to her bedside with a tenderness Lila had never seen in him, not even in the smallest moments. "Mom," he murmured, touching her hand lightly. "I'm here." Denise stirred, eyes fluttering. When she looked up, her gaze caught on Lila standing near the doorway, still and unsure. "And who's this pretty girl?" Denise asked faintly, voice thin but warm. Adrian hesitated for the briefest second. Lila held her breath. "This is Lila," he said softly. A name, nothing else. But something about the way he said it, gentle, weighted, made her chest tighten. Maya stood behind them, arms folded, watching everything with eyes that could slice through steel. "She's a friend," Adrian added. Something flickered across Lila's face, relief and ache tangled together. Friend. It wasn't wrong, but it wasn't true either. Not anymore. Denise nodded slightly, squeezing Adrian's hand. "Good," she whispered. "You deserve kindness." Lila's throat tightened. Adrian looked away, jaw flexing with emotions he didn't know how to show. For a while, there were only quiet sounds, the monitor's soft beep, the rustle of sheets, Denise's thin breaths. Lila stood near the foot of the bed, unsure where to put her hands, her fear of intruding battling the undeniable fact that she needed to be here. When a nurse entered to adjust Denise's fore, she gave Lila a curious look, then Adrian a knowing one. Lila wondered how she appeared. Designer coat in a room where everything felt fragile and earned. When the nurse left, Adrian motioned gently toward the hallway. "Give her a moment to rest," he said. She nodded, stepping out quietly. He followed, the door clicking shut behind them. For a moment, they stood in the dim corridor, too close to distance themselves, too overwhelmed to step away. "I didn't want you to see all this," Adrian said, voice rougher than usual. "Why?" she asked. "Because it's heavy," he said. "Because this isn't the world you're used to. Because I didn't want you to feel obligated." "I don't," she said quickly. "Then why did you come?" She exhaled. "Because you didn't." His expression softened, pain flickering behind his eyes. "I didn't want to pull you into this," he murmured. "Into my world. My problems. My family struggles." "Adrian," she whispered, stepping closer. "If you think I'm standing here because of pity, then you don't see me the way you think you do." That hit him, not as accusation, but as truth. A truth he needed to hear. He ran a hand over his face, exhausted. "I didn't want you to see how much I'm holding together," he admitted. "I'm supposed to be the one who—" "You don't have to be anything right now," she interrupted. "Not for me. Not for anyone." He swallowed, his defenses faltering. "I've been fighting for so long," he said quietly. "Holding down 2 jobs, caring for my mom, supporting Maya. I don't know what it feels like to have someone beside me without asking for anything." Her voice softened. "Then let me be the first." He looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much responsibility and not enough grace. Slowly, like he wasn't sure he had the right, he let his shoulders drop. "How do you do that?" he whispered. "Do what?" "Make it easier to breathe." She didn't have an answer, but she knew the truth. He did the same for her. They walked back to the waiting area, sitting across from each other as nurses passed by. The silence was calmer now, less charged, more intimate. A shared quiet. "Adrian," she said softly, "what do you need?" He shook his head. "It doesn't matter." "It does." Even if it does, it won't change anything. Then tell me anyway. After a long pause, he lifted his gaze to hers. I need to not feel alone in this, he confessed. Something inside her cracked open, tender and certain. Then you're not. A breath escaped him, half relief, half surrender. Maya appeared down the hallway, eyes flicking between them. Suspicion softened into something more complex. But she didn't interrupt. She just nodded once, stiff but acknowledging. When Lila turned back to Adrian, he held her gaze. Raw, unfiltered, honest. Lila, he murmured, I don't know where this leads. I don't either, she whispered. But for the first time in years, I want to find out. His jaw tensed, his breath unsteady, and for the first time, he didn't hide the way he felt. Stay, he said quietly. Please. And she did, not because she felt obligated, not because she was curious, but because she finally understood this truth between them was no longer something to fear. It was something to choose. Morning light leaked through the slatted blinds of the waiting room, soft and tired, the kind of light that made people admit truths they hid during the day. Lila hadn't slept. Adrian hadn't either, but neither seemed to care. They sat side by side, not touching, but close enough that the space between them felt intentional, like a boundary they weren't crossing yet, but one they were both leaning toward. Denise was stable. The doctors said she'd need monitoring and medication adjustments, but she was past the worst of it. Relief softened Adrian's features, but fatigue clung to him like a second skin. Maya returned with 2 vending machine coffees, handing one to her brother and then, after a long, assessing pause, offering the other to Lila. It wasn't kindness exactly, more like acknowledgement. The kind people give when they realize someone isn't going away. Thanks, Lila said quietly. Maya didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. She's strong, Lila offered, nodding toward Denise's room. She raised us, Maya replied. Strength was the only option. The words held a lifetime of weight. Lila understood that. Maybe not through experience, but through empathy. And that was enough to make Maya soften by a fraction. You don't look like someone who sits in waiting rooms, Maya said, voice blunt, but not cruel. No offense. Lila smiled faintly. None taken. I didn't think I was either. So why are you here? Lila hesitated only a moment. Because your brother matters. Maya studied her, tapping her coffee lid with a skeptical rhythm. Just so you know, she said eventually, Adrian doesn't do things halfway. If he lets you in, he lets you all the way in. I know, Lila whispered. Do you? Maya asked, eyes sharp. Because his world isn't simple. It's not polished. It's not curated. It's messy, sometimes ugly. And people like you don't usually stay when things stop being interesting. Lila met her gaze without flinching. I'm not here because it's interesting. Maya paused, then gave a single nod. Not approval, but permission. A small, cautious door opening. When she walked away, Adrian turned to Lila. She's protective, he said. She loves you, Lila replied. She doesn't want you hurt. He looked down at his coffee, as if unsure how to hold the emotion behind her words. I'm used to being the one protecting people, he said. Not the one being looked out for. Then maybe it's time someone stood next to you instead of behind you, she said softly. He glanced at her, quick, instinctive, and the look in his eyes was almost too vulnerable to hold. But he didn't look away. What about you, he asked. Who stands next to you? She let out a quiet, humorless laugh. Mostly people standing above me. Watching. Expecting. Measuring. Sounds exhausting. It is. He leaned back in his chair, studying her in that way he always did. Seeing more than she said, maybe more than she meant to reveal. You ever tell your mom no? He asked. She blinked. What? Your family. Your firm. Anyone. Do you ever say no to them? She hesitated, a long quiet collapsing between them. No, she admitted. Not really. Why? Because it's easier to be who they expect. And harder to be who you are, he said gently. The truth struck her like a sudden shift in gravity. She swallowed. I don't know who I am outside of what they want. Then maybe this is where you start, he said softly. Right here. Right now. She stared at him. At the exhaustion in his face, the steadiness in his voice, the quiet truth in his eyes. And she realized something terrifying. He didn't just see her. He mirrored her. Not her polished version. Not her curated exterior. Her. The parts she'd spent years burying under ambition and expectations. Adrian, she whispered. I don't want to lose myself anymore. Then don't, he murmured. Choose differently. She exhaled shakily. I'm trying. Trying isn't enough, he said. Not for something real. The honesty didn't hurt. It clarified. Adrian, she asked quietly, are you afraid of what happens if we choose this? Every minute, he answered. And are you? She nodded. Terrified. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice steady despite everything. Then we're already on the same page. She smiled. A small, trembling thing, but real. Then his phone buzzed. A reminder from work. A shift he was already late for. The world tugging him back into responsibility. Obligation. Wait. Go, she said gently. I'll stay with your mom until Maya gets back. He looked at her then. Really looked, and something inside him unraveled. You don't have to. I know, she whispered. But I want to. The air thickened with unspoken meaning. With everything they were becoming, without saying a word. Adrian stood slowly. Thank you, he murmured. For being here. He hesitated, then touched her hand. Barely. A light, fleeting brush. But it sent something electric through her. I'll be back soon, he whispered. And as she watched him walk out into the bright hallway, she realized this wasn't the beginning of something fragile. It was the beginning of something inevitable. The firm felt different the next day, not because anything had changed, but because everything had. Lila walked through the lobby with a new, fragile certainty sitting beneath her ribs, a quiet sense of direction she wasn't ready to name. She'd spent the morning at the hospital with Denise, talking softly while Maya napped in a chair. Adrian hadn't returned yet. His night shift carried him somewhere across the city, but he'd texted once. Thank you for staying. It meant more than you know. She reread the message 3 times before entering the building. And now, facing the polished hallways and crisp suits, she felt the divide between his world and hers more sharply than ever. It didn't make her pull back. It made her restless. Senior partner Charles Redmond summoned her again, this time with a tone of curated concern. Close the door, Lila. She obeyed, spine straight. You left early yesterday, he said. You seemed distressed. I had a personal matter, she replied. We all do, he said. But your performance, your reliability, they've always set you apart. I'd hate to see that compromised. There it was. The warning wrapped in mentorship. We've heard you've been distracted. I've been handling my work, she said. Yes, but something has shifted. His gaze sharpened. You're too poised for slip-ups. Too focused to let your judgment blur. And yet, he let the implication hang. Charles, she said, steadying her voice, if this is about who I speak to in the building at night, it is about the image you project, he interrupted. This firm caters to certain clients, certain expectations. Optics matter. You know this. The words tasted bitter. Are you saying I can't speak to a member of staff? I'm saying people talk, he replied calmly. And you are on partner track. Every step you take is watched, evaluated. Every word pressed against her chest like a tightening band. I trust you'll make the right choices, Charles said finally, dismissing her. She left his office with her jaw clenched, pulse sharp against her ribs. The old Lila would have swallowed the warning, buried it, and walked straighter. But last night's truth still clung to her. The quiet of the hospital, the vulnerability in Adrian's voice, the soft gratitude in Denise's eyes. Real things. Things that didn't evaporate under fluorescent office lights. She reached the elevator when her phone buzzed. From Adrian, heading home. Hospital said Mom's improving. Maya told me you stayed longer than I realized. I owe you more thanks than I can fit in a text. Her breath softened. From Lila, you don't owe me. I wanted to be there. The reply didn't come immediately, but when it did, it steadied her in a way no affirmation from the firm ever had. Then maybe I want that too. She read the message twice before stepping into the elevator, heart thudding with an emotion that was growing too quickly to ignore. That evening, she drove to his neighborhood again, not impulsively, but deliberately. Adrian met her outside, shoulders tense until he saw her, then easing in a way he didn't hide. You didn't have to come back, he said. I know, she whispered. But something's becoming clear to me, and I'm not running from it. He let out a breath, almost a laugh. You're going to make this harder to resist. Then don't resist, she said, surprising even herself. He stepped closer, stopping inches from her, the weight of everything unspoken settling between them. Lila, he murmured, voice low. If we choose this, everything changes. She lifted her gaze to meet his. Maybe that's the point. The streetlight above them flickered. His breath hitched. And for the first time, the fear between them wasn't about falling. It was about what would happen if they didn't. The night felt strangely familiar. Quiet streets, distant sirens, the hum of city life stretching into darkness. Yet everything inside Lila felt entirely new. Adrian led her up the dim stairwell to his apartment. But instead of stopping at the door, he paused halfway, turning back to face her. "Before we go inside," he said, voice steadier than his eyes, "you need to understand something." She waited. He swallowed. "My life isn't neat. It isn't polished. It isn't built for someone who's had doors opened for them since childhood. And," she whispered, "and I don't want you stepping into this because it feels different or exciting. I want you stepping into it because you choose me, not the contrast between our worlds." Lila's breath slowed, deepened. "Adrian," she said softly, "I'm not here because of excitement. I'm here because the moment you stopped showing up, I realized my world felt quieter, emptier, without you in it." Something flickered in his eyes, something he'd buried behind years of responsibility and caution. "You really mean that?" "Yes." He let out a shaky breath, the kind that carried relief and fear at once. "Okay," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "Okay." They walked into the apartment. Denise slept peacefully. Maya glanced up from the kitchen table where bills were spread out, her eyes sharpening. But instead of questioning, she simply said, "She can stay." And that small gesture, a nod from the person who guarded Adrian most fiercely, settled something between them. Lila sat beside him on the worn couch. No city skyline, no office lights, no polished glass walls, just the soft hum of an old refrigerator and the warmth of Adrian's shoulder inches from hers. He spoke first. "I don't know how to balance all of this," he admitted. "My family, my work, my life, and whatever this is becoming. We'll figure it out," she whispered. "Together." He turned slightly, studying her face as if memorizing it. "And what about your world?" he asked. "Your firm, your mother, everyone who thinks they know what your life should look like. They don't get to decide anymore," she said firmly. He raised an eyebrow. "And that's new for you?" "Yes," she breathed. "But wanting you is new too." His composure broke then, not dramatically, but gently, like a wall easing open. He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull back, but she didn't. Their hands met, fingers brushing, then folding together. A simple touch, a quiet promise. "Lila," he said, voice low and raw. "This could get complicated. The good things always do." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "You're going to turn my life upside down." She leaned closer. "Only if you let me." He didn't pull away. He didn't overthink. He didn't retreat into caution. Instead, he whispered the truth that had been living between them for weeks. "I want to start something with you." Her chest tightened, warmth rising. "Then say it." He looked into her eyes, really looked, and let every barrier fall. "Do you think," he murmured, voice trembling with sincerity, "we could start right here?" She felt the words settle into her bones, gentle and irrevocable. "Yes," she whispered. "Right here." They didn't kiss. They didn't rush. They simply leaned into each other. Two lives that were never meant to cross, choosing to anyway. And for the first time, the distance between their worlds didn't feel like an obstacle. It felt like a beginning.